first warning is just a flicker, a thin green line gliding toward Alaska's long, lonely coastline. Inside a NORAD command post, a controller leans closer. The plot is steady. The speed is right for heavy metal. One track becomes 4. 2 are big, Tu-95 bear bombers by the look of it. 2 are faster, edgier. The escorts you bring to a photo op you plan to deny later. On cue, klaxons bark in alert barns, and a familiar ballet begins. E3 airborne command post rolling, 4 F-16 knifing into the cold, and 4 KC-135S lumbering skyward to pour fuel into the fight that hopefully never comes. It's a script everyone knows, and nobody takes for granted. The Russians remain in the Alaskan ADIZ, the buffer outside sovereign airspace. The Americans slide in to say hello without saying a word. Routine? Yes, but routine in this neighborhood is exactly what deterrence looks like on a Wednesday. NORAD's phrasing matters. Detected and tracked, operating in the ADIZ, no breach of US or Canadian airspace. Those lines are the guardrails that keep a cold morning over the Bering Sea from turning into a hot afternoon. Yet frequency is its own message, and 2025 has been busy. Intercepts in the Alaskan approaches have stacked up in bursts, 3 in a month, 9 in the year by late September. Each one a professionalism drill for US crews and a propaganda clip for Moscow's evening news. The package, a flying radar room, fighters to identify and shadow, tankers to make Alaska less far from Alaska, shows how much orchestration it takes to preserve a simple sentence. Nothing unusual happened today. From the cockpit, an intercept is a waltz, not a dogfight. The E3 stretches the radar horizon forward. The F-16 ease in low and aft, cameras running, cross-checking tail numbers and armament. Radios stay calm, hands stay steady. And because the nearest diversion field might be 100 snow-blasted miles away, the KC-135s orbit like patient lifeguards. This is the vocabulary of the ADIZ: presence, procedure, predictability. When it works, the closest thing to drama is a bomber's wing rock and a fighter pilot's GoPro catching prop tips blurring like scythes. If you're picturing a Top Gun barrel roll, that's Hollywood. This is spreadsheet-level aviation. Less sizzle, more safety. But if you zoom out from the Bering Sea, the picture in 2025 gets louder and wider. The same week American fighters were shadowing bears, NATO capitals were dealing with hybrid airspace headaches that felt custom-built to test cohesion without quite tripping a tripwire. Poland announced it had shot down drones crossing its border during a large Russian strike on Ukraine, the first time a NATO country openly said it engaged intruding objects over its own territory during this war, and simultaneously requested alliance consultations under Article 4. It wasn't just a local squall, it was storm warning language for the entire eastern flank. Estonia then reported something even bolder. 3 Russian MiG-31s tearing into Estonian airspace for roughly a dozen minutes, an eternity in jet time, days after Russia and Belarus wrapped up their Zapad 2025 exercise set, which included nuclear-related drills. Tallinn called it unprecedentedly brazen. NATO called a special meeting. Moscow called it all a misunderstanding. Everyone else called their lawyers and their logisticians. The details matter less than the tempo. Push, test, deny. Repeat next week with a slightly different instrument. Further north and west, Denmark had to shut, reopen, and then shut airports again after swarms of unauthorized drones prowled over runways, and even a base that hosts F-16 and F-35s. Episodes officials labeled systematic and professional, the kind of probe that aims to sow fear and map response times at the same moment. Copenhagen didn't directly assign blame, but its intelligence services' warnings about Russian espionage and sabotage set the tone, and Danish ministers spoke openly about a hybrid attack campaign rippling across Europe. Notably, Lithuania authorized its military to shoot down intruding drones, evidence that allies are adjusting their rules on the fly to meet a threat that may cost a few $1,000s and cause millions in disruption. If Europe's skies feel warped right now, some of that is by design. The Kremlin has spent years building a reputation as the world's premier bad neighbor in the electromagnetic spectrum, And 2025 has showcased a sharper edge: GPS interference that increasingly shifts from crude jamming to sophisticated spoofing, tricking receivers into wrong positions rather than simply blinding them. Researchers traced much of the interference in the Baltic region to sites in the Kaliningrad area, and a highly publicized jamming episode even affected a European official's aircraft. That's not just mischief, it's a way to complicate everything from civilian air traffic to military command and control, day after day, at discount prices. On the cyber front, the pattern rhymes. European threat teams flagged GRU-linked operations and pseudo-hacktivist waves against elections, ministries, and even defense targets. Not catastrophic on their own, but corrosive in aggregate, especially when synchronized with drone scares, airspace incursions, and legal lawfare over maritime baselines. It's that hybrid, seam-ripping strategy again. Flood the zone with nuisance and narrative, then step back while the target argues about which ministry owns the problem. Speaking of maritime rules, Moscow quietly drew new strait baselines in the eastern Gulf of Finland, effectively redrawing where its internal waters begin. Legal experts warned that the change complicates Baltic navigation and expands zones Russia can try to police. On paper now, in practice tomorrow. Pair that with Russia's fleet behavior around northern cables and energy infrastructure, and you get the maritime version of those drones over airports. Ambiguous, deniable, and full of strategic leverage. The week the Royal Navy publicly tracked the research ship Yantar, nosing near UK undersea assets, Britain's Defence Secretary spelled out the concern with unusual bluntness. Undersea infrastructure is a vulnerability, and Russia knows it. At sea, 2025 has been a year of noisy theatre marathons. In July, Russia staged July Storm, multi-theatre naval drills spanning the Pacific, Arctic, Baltic, and Caspian, with reported participation in the triple digits for vessels, aircraft, and coastal missile systems. The stated focus included anti-submarine ops, defending deployment areas, beating back drone swarms, and striking enemy targets. Essentially, a dress rehearsal for the blended threats the Ukraine war has made famous. The backdrop: a navy absorbing painful losses in the Black Sea, but still able to mass power elsewhere, and remind everyone that submarines, not surface ships, carry the kingdom's crown jewels. That crown, of course, is the sea-based nuclear deterrent. Early in the year, the venerable Bryansk returned from a refit to resume deterrence patrols with 16 SLBMs, while newer Bore A boats continued sliding into service, strengthening the Northern Fleet's bastion strategy in the Arctic. Analysts expect 6 Bore SSBNs concentrated in the Kola approaches long-term, the kind of nuclear insurance that measures credibility in quiet patrols and unreadable sonograms. Call it the opposite of the bear bomber photo op. The less you see, the more it matters. The Arctic isn't just for submarines. Exercise reporting and open-source tracking show Russian amphibious forces practicing landings in Franz Josef Land during the Zapad cycle, a reminder that Moscow treats the High North as both buffer and billboard. When those drills sync with air intercepts off Alaska and GPS interference in the Baltics, the connective tissue becomes hard to miss. Russia is rehearsing how to stretch NATO attention across time zones and domains while keeping each move under some legal or narrative cover. It's a strategy of many small headaches adding up to a migraine. Meanwhile, on the alliance side, there's adaptation. NATO's North Atlantic Council met on short notice to discuss the Estonian violation. Lithuania changed its rules to shoot down intruding drones. Turkey dispatched an AWACS to Lithuania to bolster the air picture. Poland's Prime Minister said plainly that clear-cut airspace violations will be met with fire, full stop. And in Warsaw, leaders praised both Polish troops and the Dutch allies who helped during the multi-drone incursion, even as they wrestled with the uncomfortable economics of using an F-35 class fighter to kill a flying lawnmower. That last dilemma is exactly the point of the pressure. Make defenders spend big to stop cheap. Hybrid pressure isn't only steel and electrons, it's law and maps. Russia's Baltic baselines move narrow corridors and adds dispute fuel. Its Navy's close interest in seabed infrastructure shapes risk calculus for everything from data to wind power. European reports warn the hybrid campaign is likely to escalate, around major political events, including NATO summits, and may specifically target submarine cables. You don't need an explosion to bend policy. Sometimes a survey vessel loitering over your transatlantic internet is persuasion enough. Back in the ADIZ, the "Why Alaska" answer is geography and signaling. The shortest path from Russia's Far East to our headlines has always been over cold water and colder air. Each intercept is a postcard from the Great Circle route, proof that crews are current, radars are listening, and tankers can stitch together an air defense grid over a continent-sized wilderness. It also lets Moscow gather electronic order of battle data on Western radars and comms, because the E-3 and its fighter package are a radio orchestra, and every rehearsal leaks a little music to anyone with an ear. That exchange cuts both ways. Those escorting F-16 are collecting too. Zapad 2025 deserves a closer look. Not because it's new, these joint drills with Belarus are a long-running series, but because of what this iteration practiced and when. Reports of nuclear-related drill elements and the timing around the Estonian airspace violation make for an uncomfortable overlap. The choreography says deterrence, the footwork says testing. In a rules-based order, violating a neighbor's airspace for 12 minutes is not a deconfliction error. It's a message with a timestamp. NATO replied with process and posture, which is exactly how you keep a message from becoming a precedent. Let's talk electronic warfare again, because it's the quiet star of 2025. The shift from jamming to spoofing in the Baltic is particularly nasty. Rather than blocking your GPS, I convince your receiver you're somewhere else. Aviation hates ambiguity. Ships and unmanned systems hate it even more. When spoofing ripples through civil air corridors, you get delays, diversions, and creeping normalization of abnormal. In military planning, that forces redundancy. More inertial nav, more alternate procedures, more cost. It's the strategic equivalent of putting sand in your opponent's shoes before the race and then betting the photo finish. Cyber operations round out the triad. European threat briefs in 2025 repeatedly called out GRU-linked activity and hacktivist waves targeting elections and defense. No single intrusion topples a government, but the drumbeat erodes attention and steals bandwidth from ministers and majors who also have to worry about drones over runways and jets on the wrong side of a border. The genius of hybrid pressure is that it rarely triggers Article 5, but it always costs you something to answer, and the bill is due every week. If you're a planner in Brussels, Ottawa, or Washington, you read those Alaska intercept notes alongside reports about Danish airspace closures, Estonian violations, and Baltic spoofing. Then you start writing checks. Some of them are for new radar and C2, some for counter-drone kits at airports, some for naval escorts that shadow research vessels like a persistent seagull. The point isn't to win a one-off. It's to build a system that makes the next probe less rewarding than the last. That's deterrence too, death by boredom for the provocateur. Meanwhile, Russia is modernizing in uneven but potent ways. Its long-range aviation units can still put Bears and MiG-31s where cameras can see them. Its navy, battered in the Black Sea, still fields a growing Boreas SSBN fleet and long-reach Caliber-class shooters aboard small corvettes, making up in missile quality what it lacks in hull size. Its legal moves in the Baltic seek to bracket sea space as boldly as its EW brackets the spectrum. That doesn't make Moscow 10 feet tall. It makes it adaptive, opportunistic, and very willing to spend a little to make you spend a lot. Now, 3 quick laughs to keep the blood pressure humane. 1. The Tu-95's contra-rotating props make a noise best described as Soviet leaf blower meets thunderstorm. Imagine doing your day job with that in your headset, and tell me pilots don't deserve better coffee. 2. The KC-135 tanker. Entered service when cars had fins. Somehow it still shows up on time like the world's most punctual grandparent. 3. Every time a MiG-31 sprints, somewhere a fuel accountant weeps. Humor aside, longevity and logistics are part of the deterrence story. Old airframes with new guts and ironclad procedures can still ruin an adversary's day. Back to Poland for a final connective thread. When drones crossed its borders, Warsaw didn't just scramble jets. It tightened air traffic in the east, praised allies who joined the hunt, and warned that provocations would meet force. Those choices telegraph a doctrine. Treat hybrid as serious. Answer proportionally but publicly. and keep the alliance loop tight. The same day, Polish leaders stood on a flight line and promised accelerated modernization, including the first F-35 deliveries next year, because nothing calms a nervous neighborhood like your own credible capacity. And in the background, analysts warned that Europe's deterrence gap isn't in speeches, it's in follow-through. So what does the Alaska intercept actually mean in 2025? It's a beat in a longer song. In the high north, it's Moscow, demonstrating reach and gathering signatures. In the Baltics, it's drones and spoofing and new maritime lines daring Europe to say no. In the Black Sea and Arctic, it's exercises that stress anti-submarine warfare and bastion defense, while submarines slip under the ice and surface ships pose for cameras. And threading through it all is a narrative intended to make NATO look reactive and divided, while Russia looks unbothered and inevitable. The alliance answer can't be just scramble and shrug. It has to be modernization you can see, legal countermoves you can cite, and daily procedural excellence you can't fake. In the end, the chessboard stretches from the Gulf of Finland to the Bering Sea. On one edge, a KC-135 arcs over snowfields, while a Viper slides in on a bear's wing, unflustered. On another, a drone with a blinking green light hovers above a runway, and a police chief gets a phone call he never wanted. In between, cables home under cold water, and a submarine captain counts down the last minutes to patrol depth. That's the 2025 operating picture. No single crisis, just 1,000 needles. The question for us is whether we keep investing in the dull, durable things, sensors, tankers, counter-drone nets, cyber hygiene, that make the spectacular events end in yawns. Because that little blip on the Alaska scope, it will be back tomorrow. The only suspense is whether we meet it with noise, or with the practiced quiet that keeps borders boring.